I've mentioned something called dual axes graphs many times so far. I do not expect them as part of your fertility assignment, but they are something I'm going to start expecting in your future assignments, or expecting you to consider them as an option if it's appropriate for what you're doing. Dual axes graphs take one data element and graph it up against an axis along the left side and take the other and graph it along an axis up against the right side. What that does is that gets around this issue of the drastically different magnitudes of data here. So I'm going to just create a standard line graph, just our typical, there we go. And we've already talked about how that hardly shows, and it can be very difficult to interpret if there's not much going on there. A dual axis graph gets around that by plotting this range of numbers, the 0 to 600 along this axis, and the range of numbers for crude birth rate along this axis, which allows you to see that variation more clearly. To create a dual axis graph, you highlight one of your two axes. Now in this case, I think it's going to be more appropriate to have the crude birth rates run along the right axis and the births run along the left axis, but it doesn't matter that much. And you'll notice I'm having trouble actually clicking on that line, and it's because it's so small in comparison. There we go, got it. So it's sometimes easier to do the one that's more apparent, but I wanted this one. Now I'm going to right click, and when I right clicked, I lost my click on that. There we go, right click, or I believe it's command click on a Mac. I am going to format my data series. Series just refers to that data element. In my version of Excel, this series option comes up first. You may have it in a slightly different place on your version of Excel. What you're looking for is something called a series option plot series on. I'm just going to change that to secondary axis. It's that simple. Close, and now you'll see that there's a secondary axis. Crude birth rates runs from 0 to 12 here, and our births are running from 420 to 560 there. And go ahead and change that. Now, there are some other things that I want to do to tweak this table. Because dual axes make it appear that these two things are interacting directly, it can be a way to misrepresent what's going on with your data. I like that this crude birth rate is starting with 0, and I would like my axis over here to also start with 0, rather than compressing it all within that range of 420 to 560. So to get to that, I'm right clicking on that number, those axes, and I am going to format that axis. And I'm going to force the minimum, I'm going to fixed, to be 0. And then close. All right, so now you see how it's no longer making it look like crude birth rates and births are somehow crossing over each other in time. Instead, it's showing, and you can clearly see that there is a pattern going on here, in which here are our births and here are our crude birth rates. And where you see the lines start to differ a little bit between the two is an indicator, also you can see that with the data here, that the age structure is such that the number of births can drop more rapidly than the crude birth rate. That's really all I'm learning out of this. So when in doubt, set your axes to 0 and it will clear up any confusions there. So this is an effectively formatted dual axes graph of crude birth rates and births. And that's a dual axis.